There's a point where adapting stops being a skill and starts becoming a habit you don't question. You adjust your tone, your expectations, your needs, not because you're asked to explicitly, but because it keeps things smoother. You learn how to fit into rooms, relationships, and systems without friction. Over time, those small adjustments accumulate. You're still functioning, still participating, still seen as capable, but something feels thinner, less defined. Adaption keeps you included, but you're no longer sure what you've been adapting away from. Adaption becomes tense when it's no longer conscious. What starts as flexibility slowly turns into self-monitoring, scanning for what's acceptable before you respond, adjusting yourself preemptively to avoid discomfort or conflict. The tension comes from constantly moving, internally, even when nothing appears wrong on the surface. This creates an internal split. One part of you manages the environment, while another quietly keeps track of what's being suppressed. You may not feel overt distress, but you feel less anchored. Decisions feel harder. Preferences blur. You're accommodating without remembering when or why you began. Over time, the cost shows up not as crisis, but as erosion. A gradual thinning of clarity that leaves you functioning, but increasingly disconnected from your own internal reference points. Think of the moment when someone asks you what you want, and you hesitate. Not because you don't care, but because you've spent so long adjusting to what works for others that your own preferences don't surface immediately. You default to what's easiest, what keeps things moving, what avoids negotiation. Later, the feeling lingers. Not resentment exactly, but a quiet sense of distance from yourself. You can't point to a single moment where you gave something up, only a pattern of small accommodations that never seemed important enough to question. The realization lands slowly. Adaptation didn't demand anything all at once. It just kept asking for a little less of you each time, until there was noticeably less to offer. The shift happens when you recognize that adaptation is a skill, not an identity. It's something you use, not something you're meant to become. Flexibility helps you navigate environments, but when it replaces self reference entirely, it stops being adaptive and starts being extractive. Seeing this clearly reframes the problem. You haven't lost yourself because you were weak or unaware. You adapted because it worked. It kept you safe, included, and functional. The issue isn't adaptation itself, it's the absence of a pause where you check whether the adjustment still serves you. This perspective restores choice. It allows you to treat adaptation as a tool you can pick up or set down, rather than a default setting that quietly reshapes you over time. Navigating the point where adaptation turns into self erosion starts with reintroducing a pause. Before adjusting, before smoothing, before accommodating, check in with what you actually want or need in that moment, not to force a different outcome, but to keep yourself present in the decision. You don't need to stop adapting altogether, you just need to make it conscious again. Small questions help. Am I choosing this or defaulting to it? Would I still do this if there were no pressure to keep things easy? These moments of awareness rebuild internal reference points without requiring confrontation. Adaptation becomes sustainable when it's balanced with self acknowledgement. When you stay in contact with yourself while adjusting, flexibility remains a skill, not a slow disappearance. Many modern environments quietly reward people who adapt without resistance. Smoothness is praised, flexibility is expected, friction is discouraged. Over time, this creates systems that function efficiently while subtly encouraging self erasure in those most capable of adjusting. In these spaces, adaptation is treated as maturity rather than labor. The cost of constant adjustment is rarely acknowledged because it doesn't interrupt outcomes, it just reshapes the person doing it. Those who adapt well are often trusted more, relied on more, and consulted less about whether the conditions themselves should change. Recognizing this pattern shifts the focus away from personal failure and towards social design. It asks not just who is adaptable, but what adaptation is protecting. and whether environments are evolving or simply asking the same people to keep thinning themselves to fit. When adaptation turns into self erosion, the answer isn't rigidity, it's awareness. You don't have to stop adjusting to remain whole. You just have to stay in contact with yourself while you do. If this resonates, we explore these dynamics further across our work on navigating modern social spaces with clarity and dignity.